I was living overseas when I became infected with HIV. My life at that time was pretty good. I had just moved into my own flat. I was doing contract work and earning pretty good money, and I was in love. Like me, my partner was also from overseas. I had met him whilst backpacking, and now that I had settled in a new country, he had come to visit me after what had felt like a very long-distance relationship. In the first few weeks he was here, things were very intense. We had both had all the tests done for STDs and HIV, and they were both negative, and we missed each other, so it was quite full on. But then, really quickly, we both started to get sick, really sick, and eventually my partner was taken to hospital for testing. I followed him a few days later. I know this sounds strange, but I even remember the day I believe the virus dropped into my body. It was a Friday and I was at work, and my boss and I walked over to the canteen to get some coffee, and I just turned to him and I said, "I feel so strange. I know I'm going to be ill. It feels like it could just be over the weekend or more serious." The closest way to describe it is to say that it was like having pins and needles all over my body and just not being able to eat. I completely lost my appetite over the weekend, and as someone who likes to eat, that was a big deal. In desperation, my boyfriend went and bought me all this chocolate, and I couldn't even eat that, so already alarm bells were going off. My boyfriend was tested first, before I had even been hospitalised. A young doctor just walked into his ward and said, "Oh, by the way, you've got HIV." Didn't wait until he had support around. No counselling, no time for questions, nothing. He just walked away. I'm really close to my family, and I was in daily contact with them. At this time, Mum knew that I was sick, but she didn't know that I was going to be tested for HIV. I didn't have many people to turn to, as I was quite new to the country myself. Thankfully, my mum dropped everything and came over from New Zealand to be with me. When the nurse finally told me, I just burst out sobbing and asked if I was going to die. In contrast to how my partner was told, this nurse was such a lovely, gentle person, and he explained to me that I would probably live a long life. But for a while there, things went really pear-shaped. I needed to keep working to pay the rent, so I negotiated with the doctors to let me work during the day and then come back to hospital at night. I had to keep my hospital wristband on, but I'd drive myself to work. But I was so sick. I remember just having to pull myself up the stairs and nearly fainting. I have no idea what my colleagues must have thought, but I was so desperate to get some money to support us. Finally, I realised that my health was more important and that I wasn't going to get well if I worked. So by the time Mum left, we were a day away from being homeless. We just put everything in the car and went to social services. Luckily, there were social services, but the bureaucracy is stupid. You see, you have to ring up on the day that you become homeless. You can't plan to be homeless, even though you know you're going to be homeless. We ended up being put into a B&B, a scungy building where there are some staff who give you some food in the morning and then sign you in every night. You can't visit friends or go out for a meal. It was a real eye-opener about how hard life can be when you don't have money or resources, and how quickly it can fall away when you lose your health. Once you're in the system, it's amazing how hard it is to get out of it. It's as if the system keeps you dependent. We were just getting more and more into debt. I was able to get treatment quite easily because I have dual citizenship, but my partner, as a visitor, was not so lucky. We were told he'd have to pay for treatment, which was going to be expensive. I felt so stupid about it all, and it seemed so unfair that healthcare was dependent on what passport you had. And taking the medication? Well, I can't tell you what a huge difference that made, just in helping me start to feel slightly normal again. I was determined to turn things around, so I got a part-time job and would sneak out of the B&B in the morning and then sign back in at night. I didn't tell the government that I had a job, so we could save our money for our own place. But because of my health, I felt I couldn't do contract work anymore, which is where the big money is. So I ended up in a permanent job that didn't pay much, just getting by, again trapped in poverty with a low income. But I did start to look like a council worker again, so some of my inmates thought I was from the council checking up on them. But I'd say no, I'm one of you guys, and eventually we got into our own flat again. My partner still couldn't work, and we needed for him to be eligible for treatment, and a legal aid lawyer told us that there was a visa he could apply for called discretionary leave to remain. We also wanted to get married. We knew we wanted to be together. Although it was quite a new relationship, my gut feeling was that this was a good man, and I was right, as we're still together today. Anyway, we had to apply to get married, and they refused us. It was as if the system had control over so much of our lives. It was like living in limbo, waiting to see what decision would be made about the visa, and not being allowed to marry. You couldn't even contact a case officer from immigration to find out what was going on. If you wanted to know where things were at, you had to contact your MP, But then that meant revealing your status, and we didn't want anyone to know. Eventually, a decision was made and the visa refused. We could have appealed, but my partner said, "I've had enough. I'm going home." So he went home and we got married in his country. The legal aid lawyer said once you're married he'll be able to come back as your legal partner. So we put in an application for him to return, but it was knocked back. I can't believe how much crap that lawyer told us. Eventually I had enough money and had done some research, and I managed to get a top lawyer from London, and he was amazing. The minute he saw the refusal decision from the High Commission, he just shook his head and said, "I'm so sorry at how you've been treated. They've got it wrong, and they've quoted the wrong legislation." It was just unbelievable. We didn't even have to go to appeal. He just got the decision reversed, but it was 6 months before we could see each other again. It was such a lot to hold emotionally. Firstly, getting sick, thinking I was going to die, having my house, my home taken away from me, having the person I loved taken away from me. And it's just bureaucracy playing horrible, horrible games with people's lives, not to mention the financial stress we were under. A lot of people would have walked away, but for me it was not an option. We were a team and we were in this together. The one thing that did give me strength through all of this was something that the nurse had told me when I was first diagnosed. He told me that I could have children if all things were going well, and that was just like a huge beam of light in my life. Just knowing that we could have a family and that it was highly likely that the child would be born negative and healthy. That was a miraculous experience. Things have really come a long way in that regard. And now we have 2 happy, healthy children in our lives. But it was still a huge decision. Living with HIV, well, it's like you live in a secret underworld because you don't tell many people you're positive. I mean, for a while there, when we first moved back to New Zealand, we lived in a small town, close to my sister, and I needed to see a doctor. And my sister, who was a health professional, she said, "To be honest, I don't think you should see one here. You know, everyone talks. There's only 2 people in this town with HIV, but when you go to the doctor, it flashes up on your file. Even the receptionist knows." So how wrong is that? I'm hoping that by the time my children get into their teens, there will be a lot more awareness and less stigma, and it will be okay to tell them. We still have to navigate that though, so I guess that's our next challenge. But in the meantime, we're just enjoying being a family.